100 NBA draft lottery simulations. That's exactly what we're doing in this video. The entire purpose is to gather data. We're going to look at trends. We're going to look at which teams got which pick most frequently. We're going to look at which teams were in the top 4 most often. We're going to look at the average selection for each pick. Where are they often likely to be picking with the NBA draft lottery coming up on May 12th. This video is meant to be a lot of fun. We're going to gather data. We're going to have some graphs and charts and everything at the very end as well. So I do hope you guys enjoy the video. If you do, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe. And let's go ahead here now and start with that very first simulation to kick things off here. Simulating now the Washington Wizards get the first pick. As you can tell, I'm going to be entering the data here on a spreadsheet, keeping up with everything. The Philadelphia 76ers here with the second overall pick. Remember, this pick is technically protected out to the Oklahoma City Thunder. So if it fell to pick 7 in this simulation, I would have marked it as red. It obviously did not. So this one will be the 76ers pick. In this simulation, the Utah Jazz will pick 3rd. And the Brooklyn Nets would pick 4th, which would push Charlotte down to 5. New Orleans down to 6. Toronto down to 7. The Spurs at 8, the Rockets, which have this pick unprotected, at 9, Portland at 10, Dallas at 11, Chicago at 12, the Kings at 13, which they do owe this pick to Atlanta, and then also the Spurs here via the Hawks at number 14. That's how we're going to do this video. I'm going to turn it into a time lapse here for you now with the remaining 99 lottery simulations, and then we'll look at the data, trends, and analysis at the very end. Alright, so after collecting data from 100 lottery simulations on Tankathon, I have now visualized that data with a variety of graphs and charts that I think will be very helpful to explain the NBA draft lottery process a little bit more, and super fun to look at. So again, I hope you guys have enjoyed the video up to this point. And let's get into that data here, starting with the average draft selection for all of the teams in the draft lottery this year. And I think this is a really interesting chart, and the trend line specifically makes a ton of sense for what you would expect this to look like. The teams with the worst record, the Jazz, Wizards, Hornets specifically, had a much lower average draft selection, which means they were closer to pick number one way more frequently, which is what you'd want to see and what you'd expect to see in an NBA draft lottery. Specifically, since the NBA does not have a fixed draft order the way that the NFL does, where the worst team is just awarded the first overall pick, this is a balanced approach in order to disincentivize tanking a bit without also putting teams into shackles and saying, hey, if you're the worst team, we're not guaranteeing you a good pick. The worst teams are still guaranteed top 5, top 6 picks, and I think that number shows out here in the data quite well. For example, the Utah Jazz, the lowest that they possibly can pick in the NBA draft this season is pick number 5. The reason for that is, again, that the top 4 picks are done through the lottery. Pick 5 through 30 are then decided by reverse order of standing. So since the Jazz had the worst record, they cannot pick any lower than pick number 5. And I think you see that advantage compared to Washington here in the data, where on average Washington picked 3.7 and the Jazz picked 3.49. And now that 0.2 difference might not sound like a lot, but if Washington does fall to pick 6, which is the lowest that they can pick with the second worst record in the league, they are more likely to pick just technically lower overall through the course of 100 lottery simulations than a team like Utah is. And I think we see that throughout the course of these simulations here, as again with that trend line that you'd expect from this, the teams with the better records like Toronto, San Antonio, the Phoenix Suns, which conveys to Houston, Portland, Dallas, Chicago, Sacramento's pick, which will probably convey to Atlanta. Remember, there's a top 12 protection on it there. And then that Hawks pick at number 14, which will convey one way or another to San Antonio as it's completely unprotected. Their average draft slot is significantly worse than those top 3, top 4, even top 5 teams in a way, where you look at the gaps between Utah, Washington, Charlotte specifically, they're all very tightly bunched together with very identical odds to have a top 3, top 4 pick in the draft. Whereas Philadelphia, Brooklyn, you start to see that gap grow a little bit. Instead of being a 0.2 gap, it turns into a 0.5, 0.6, 0.7 gap. And then as you get a little bit further, the biggest gap is honestly between San Antonio and that Rockets pick, where it's over 1 draft pick slot difference. Now, I think one thing that's really important to remember here, this is the course of 100 lottery simulations. The real lottery is just one go. So there are crazy outliers, there are crazy examples, and one specifically that I want to show you guys right now. If we go over to simulation number 92 on the list here, look at how crazy this lottery simulation is. The top 4 teams specifically, so Charlotte and Washington, Utah, and New Orleans, none of them got a top 4 pick. This was the one simulation where it was completely different. The Kings jumped up to pick number 1. Then at number 2, it was the Philadelphia 76ers, who are not a top 4 team. Then at number 3, it was, I believe, the Toronto Raptors there. And then at 4, it was the San Antonio Spurs, who actually got picked for quite a bit in these lottery simulations. So Sim 92 was the big outlier where none of the top 4 teams by odds ended up getting a top 4 pick. So I did want to mention that as well. But again, very, very crazy stuff. And honestly, a lot of things that are very interesting to look at. One of them being the top 4 pick frequency. So since, again, the draft lottery is for the top 4 picks specifically, I thought this was a very interesting chart to show to you guys, because it shows not only which pick did teams get most frequently. You look at Utah, over 20 times in the 100 simulations they got the first overall pick, 22 times in fact, which was drastically more in this sample size than any other team. You look at Washington with those blue lines, Washington, Charlotte, both of them had the first pick just 15 times. New Orleans even less than 15 times. And then you look at Philadelphia, Brooklyn, you see that blue line get shorter and shorter. Toronto seems like the one outlier in this data set of 100 simulations. But again, an outlier doesn't mean it's not going to happen, because when you get to one simulation in real life, one actual lottery draw, anything can happen. And we saw that last year with the Hawks moving all the way up to the first overall pick. This year, obviously, with Cooper Flagg being the headliner, that's an even bigger deal. But I do think there's a lot of other interesting data in here. You look at specifically Charlotte, how bunched up they were with their picks. A bunch of them hitting about 13, 14, 15 times, whether that was first, second, third, or fourth overall, as you can tell by the different color distinguishers here. The blue lines are for the first pick, the red lines for the second pick, yellow is for the third pick, and fourth is the green bar. So you can tell that there's a huge drop-off specifically for the teams in the play-in, which we're going to showcase that again here in just a minute in a different graph that pretty much suggests the same thing but gives a better overall view in terms of percentage on a scale of 0 to 100%. But the 76ers, Nets, quite a few times they were able to get into the top 4, but you see as those odds diminish, especially toward the bottom of the lottery, when you look at the teams like the Mavericks, Bulls, Kings, and Spurs, their odds really diminished drastically throughout the course of the simulations. And it's because of those lottery odds. They have, very small percent chances of getting into the top 4, sometimes just being 1% or 2%, 2.5%, 3%. So they do have very low odds. And I think that really shows up here in their overall percentage of landing a top 4 pick. And I think this is one of the more helpful graphs in the entire video, because the whole point of this one is to show the frequency that the team ultimately was drawn in the lottery, not just getting the first overall pick. Now you can still see the colors here. Pick 1 is still blue, pick 2 is red, pick 3 is still yellow, and pick 4 is still green. So you can tell how often they got which of those top 4 picks. But the most important thing is just looking at the generic height of each bar. Obviously for a team like Utah, they got the 4th pick 15 times, they got the 2nd pick 17 times in this. But the most important thing is you look at it and say, hey, they got a top 4 pick 54% of the time. So in 54 of the 100 lottery simulations, they got a top 4 pick. Washington was even a little bit luckier in this data set, getting roughly 57 draws in the top 4 in this data set. And Charlotte, with 58 draws, was the most out of every single team, even though, yes, they have the identical odds with Utah, Washington as top 3 teams in the lottery odds. It shows how there can be a little bit of variance, and specifically how each draw is just different from any other draw. So again, luck is a huge part of it. I think the biggest thing to look at here, though, in this data set specifically for percentage of landing a top 4 pick, is the cutoff between the non-play-in teams and the play-in teams. And there is a significant difference here between even Portland and that Suns pick that conveys to Houston, compared to where the Mavericks, Bulls, Kings, and Hawks to the Spurs pick ultimately are. The odds of them moving up into the top 4 is very, very low. Honestly, very unlikely for these teams to move into the top 4. You look at Dallas, got the first pick twice and got the 4th pick 1 time, and that was it in the 100 simulations. Chicago got the 2nd pick 1 time and the 4th pick just 1 time. Then you look at Sacramento here. They got the first pick once, they got the 2nd pick 3 times in the simulation, and they got the 3rd pick twice. So in fact, kind of lucky with them getting 6 picks in the top 4 in this data set. And then you look at this pick from the Atlanta Hawks to the San Antonio Spurs. The highest that they picked in this entire process here was pick 2, I believe, and they also had pick 3 1 time and pick 4 twice. So I think this is an interesting chart to look at. It gives you a good idea of who had a top 4 pick, how many times out of 100. And obviously Charlotte was the big winner in this category in this data set, which is very fascinating. Here is the best graph in the entire video, in my opinion. And what this graph does is it showcases the lowest pick that the team got in the 100 picks. That is the blue data. And the red data shows the percentage of the time that they got that selection. And I think specifically the first team I want to talk about here is the Utah Jazz. They, at worst, can have the 5th overall pick. And for those of you who do not understand why, here are the actual draft odds. Again, via Tankathon. Huge shout out to Tankathon for their site and everything that helps me make this video. the Utah Jazz here, since they had the worst record in the NBA, again, the lowest that they can possibly pick is pick number 5. The top 4 picks done through the lottery, pick 5 would be what they are awarded if they do not get drawn in the lottery. And it's funny because with the new revamped lottery odds, since the Jazz only have a 14% chance at pick 1, 13.4% chance at pick 2, 12.7% chance at pick 3, and a 12% chance at pick 4, that adds up to a 52.1% chance to have a top 4 pick. But their most likely outcome is actually the 5th overall pick, because they have a 47.9% chance of not being drawn in the lottery, which gives them a 47.9% chance to ultimately have pick number 5. And if you look at the data set here, again, very interesting. Through 100 lottery simulations, we ended up with very comparable data to what is actually expected to happen, where 46% of the time, so 46 out of the 100 lottery simulations, the Jazz fell down to pick number 5, which is, again, not unlikely at all. We've seen it in past years with a team like the Detroit Pistons falling all the way down to pick number 5 when they had the number 1 odds coming into the lottery. Sometimes it just doesn't pan out. But the positive here in this blue line shows it is that at worst, the Jazz still have a top 5 pick. The Wizards can pick all the way down to number 6, and their odds of that happening from the 100 simulations was about 16%, which is actually a little bit lower than what their actual real life odds are at that 20% threshold. So I think, again, the Wizards got pretty lucky in this. The Hornets, if you look at them, they can pick as low as 7. That's with 4 teams jumping ahead of them. Remember, we saw that in simulation number 92, which I referenced earlier. That happened only one time, and that was that simulation 92, which is what made it such a special simulation. You see, the Hornets do have technically a 7% chance to fall all the way to pick number 7, but again, what that requires is 4 teams with worse records than them jumping up into the top 4 in the lottery. So while it's possible and not improbable at all with that 7% likelihood, in our 100 lottery simulations, it only happened one time. You look at a team as well here in New Orleans. That happened to them only one time, where they fell down to number 8. They have a 2.2% chance in real life of that happening. In our simulation, again, it was just simulation number 92, which we talked about, that caused that. I think the really fascinating one here is the Philadelphia 76ers. And if you look at theirs, pick 8 was the lowest that they picked. And this happened 6% of the time, which is actually pretty concerning, because these red numbers here showcase the possibility of them conveying their pick to the Oklahoma City Thunder. We'll talk more about what happened in this data set, what happened in our lottery simulations, and how often they sent their pick to Oklahoma City. But 6% of the time, they fell all the way down to pick number 8. You notice Brooklyn here fell down to pick number 9 just one time, I believe. You look at Toronto, San Antonio, like very, very unfrequently that they fell all the way down to their worst selection. Houston, the pick here via Phoenix, fell a couple of times. But I think the most important one to look at specifically, outside of that first overall pick and second overall pick regarding Utah and Washington, is actually the Spurs pick via Atlanta over here on the far right. And the reason for that is at 14, which is the last pick of the lottery, they actually got that pick a ton. They were picking there a lot. And as you can tell, that is a result of them not moving up in the lottery, since the Hawks, out of all the teams, have technically the best record with tiebreakers decided and everything of all the lottery teams. The Spurs are very, very likely going to hold pick number 14 on draft night unless something really crazy happens, which again, in one simulation and one lottery draw, that definitely can happen, but it's very unlikely. Now moving on to the 76ers odds to send that top 6 protected pick to Oklahoma City. And out of those 100 simulations, they did ultimately convey that pick to the Thunder 37 times. 6 of those times, like we just talked about, was at pick number 8, but 31 of them were at the ultimate worst case scenario for the 76ers, which is sending pick number 7 to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, one thing I do want to mention here as well with this, it is possible again for the Thunder to technically get the 8th overall pick, the 9th overall pick, but it is very unlikely, and in fact did not happen one time at all in our lottery simulation. So I think that's an important note to take here. And then when it comes to the Sacramento Kings sending their top 12 protected pick to Atlanta, That happened 94 times out of 100 simulations. And the reason that it didn't happen those 6 times is because Sacramento, the only way that they can save their pick with where they're sitting right now, lottery odds wise, is to move up into the top 4. And if we go look at their odds here to have a top 4 pick, they have a 0.8% chance at pick 1, 0.9% chance at pick 2, 1% chance flat at pick 3, and a 1.1% chance to have pick number 4. You put together the math on that, that is a 3.8% chance to have a top 4 pick. So with that in mind, I think going back to the data, with that 3.8% chance, you actually saw the Kings get pretty lucky in this data set. The fact that they were able to keep their pick 6 times out of 100, they actually outperformed the expected percentage of outcomes. Now, obviously, if we had a larger sample size, if we did this simulation set 1 million times, we would probably get really close to that 3.8% number. Some of my biggest takeaways, honestly, the Tankathon lottery numbers work really, really well. Again, if you go back to the data specifically and what has worked extremely well in all of this, I think it is pretty telling that the accuracy from this, specifically the pick number 1 situation here with Utah and how often they fell to pick 5. Like, these are very accurate numbers throughout the course of a 100 simulation data set. Obviously, there's going to be outliers. There's going to be situations where things don't play out perfectly, but I thought all in all, this data looked exactly like what I was expecting it to look like, and I had never done anything like this. I've never simulated 100 times and kept tally and tracked everything from Tankathon. Tankathon's site is very good. They clearly have the odds set up in a very realistic manner. And sometimes, even though, sometimes Tankathon lottery sims seem a little crazy, the results over 100 lottery simulations were very, very accurate to what I think reality likely will present. Now, again, in one lottery simulation, I keep saying this because I do think it's a really important note, even though the odds here for Dallas, Chicago, Sacramento, or the Spurs via Atlanta to get a top 4 pick isn't very good through 100 simulations, it takes just one time. It just takes one time where the Mavericks were able to get that first pick, or where the Bulls got pick number 2, or where the San Antonio Spurs via Atlanta jumped up to pick number 4. Like, that happens, and it happens quite a bit in real life. Like last year, we saw Atlanta make a crazy jump into the top 4. So don't rule anything out. Obviously, anything can happen, but what we have for data right now really does suggest that the Kings will send their pick to Atlanta. It's very likely that the 76ers do keep their pick. About a 63% chance after 100 lottery sims is what we have our data saying. And if you look at it, there's about a 50-50 coin flip that Utah has the first overall pick. Almost a 96-97% likelihood that the Spurs have the 14th pick via Atlanta. So I think all things considered, we got a lot of good data. I really hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe. I had a lot of fun recording this. Something I've never done before. Is actually a lot of work. Took a lot more time than I was expecting it to. But I really hope you guys do enjoy. If you do, again, smash that like button and subscribe. And we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.